What did Henry VIII eat? Tudor feast. Dining for the nobility during the Tudor period was about much more than just food. The variety and variety of food provided were an important way of demonstrating wealth and influence. It wasn't uncommon for rich Tudor households to spend up to a third of their annual income on. Majority of this was spent on meat, usually lamb, beef, poultry, pork, fish such as haddock, herring, or cod. Veal, venison, and wild boar were also popular. It's a common misconception that wealthy Tudors didn't eat fruit or vegetables. This is possibly brought about by the fact that the estates would have grown their own produce, and so they don't frequently show up in purchasing records. Despite this, there was a pervasive belief that fresh fruit and uncooked vegetables were unhealthy and carried disease. In the court of Henry VIII, the average courtier could be expected to be served from a daily menu that totaled around 5,000 calories. The vast kitchens at Hampton Court Palace, which Henry had extended, were able to turn out 1,000 meals a day. Food was served twice a day, once at 10 a.m. and again at 4 p.m., with dishes made from the finest ingredients that came from all four corners of the globe. Fresh, high-quality meat, though, was the most important component of the courtly diet, and included roast game, plenty of meat pies, and even swans and peacocks. Bread, too, was a staple, served with every meal. The palace bakeries made 200 cheat loaves every day, as well as 700 white manchet loaves, which resemble small white rolls and were only for high-ranking members of the court. It was known that water was often a carrier for disease, although the science explaining why was not yet understood. Ale, usually of low alcohol content, was the main drink of the court, but wine was also a popular option, with 300 barrels being consumed each year. Although fresh fruit was viewed with suspicion, when cooked and served as a preserve or baked into a pie, it was a popular choice. Henry himself is said to have been partial to marmalade. Any leftovers at the end of a meal were either passed down to those of lower rank or given away to the poor. On a day-to-day basis, the king either took his meals in his own private chambers, or in days or when notable guests were visiting, Henry would dine in public, and the Tudor flair for opulent feasts became evident. Dishes were sometimes served coated in gold or silver leaf, or scented with such exotic fragrances as rosewater, ambergris, or musk. Wafers or biscuits stamped with the royal coat of arms were usually served at the end of a banquet, but only to the king and other high-ranking members of the court. Perhaps the most extravagant part of a Tudor banquet came in the form of the subtleties. These were intricate and colorful sculptures that were made mainly of marzipan and spun sugar, and as such were exorbitantly expensive. These impressive centerpieces took many forms, including that of animals, people, ships, and various mythological scenes. Another creation was the cockatrice, a combination of a pig's head sewn to the rear of a chicken. This would both entertain and feed Henry and his guests, as it did in honor of Francis I at the Field of the Cloth of Gold. Even on days where food intake was supposed to be more frugal, the king was able to dine in style. Fridays, Saturdays, Wednesdays, and the entirety of Lent were decreed by the church to be fast days, where the consumption of meat was not allowed. To porpoise, seal, salmon, lobsters, haddock, soup, lampreys, custard, and fruit. By contrast, those at the poorer end of society would have had much more limited diets. By the time of Henry VIII's reign, most families would have been able to afford meat, although for the majority, it would usually have been preserved, either smoked or salted. Fresh vegetables, dairy, and rye, or wholemeal bread were the primary components of most meals. It is likely that he was suffering from at least one malady brought about by his poor diet, type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure being the main contenders. What is certain, though, is that Henry's inability to exercise due to a leg injury that never fully healed, combined with his huge caloric intake, meant that the obesity of his later life and the resultant health complications were inevitable. Various theories have been debated by historians regarding Henry and his ultimate demise, and whilst it is unlikely that a definitive diagnosis will ever be determined,